I know my limitations as well. So I know what I can do, but I also know within the system, I take a step back and go, well, how is the NHS going to serve this? Okay, fine. Is this someone who needs admission, or does it meet a criteria or a guideline? And that might be a binary decision. But if it's no, am I just simply going to say, no, you need to go and see your GP? Is someone going to actually accept that and actually feel happy and felt like they were listened to? The answer is no.
If you are in the process of changing careers, moving to industry, moving anywhere but your current job, then networking is a word that you definitely would have come across. And it's a very important skill that you need to learn to uncover most of the job opportunities available to you that will probably be more bespoke to you than the ones that are advertised. So hence this podcast episode, which focuses wholeheartedly on why would you need to network, some different networking styles, and a little bit about the approaches, but most importantly, explains the value of networking from real life doctors such as myself, but also Johnny Andrews. Anyway, enjoy and don't forget to subscribe. Let's face it, burnout amongst doctors is sky high, and we're actively seeking other ways to make the most of our transferable skills beyond the usual career pathways. Welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers. I'm your host, Dr. Abena Bubbs-Jones, and I'm on a mission to connect 1 million doctors across the world with the best in diverse career opportunities. Hello, everybody. We are going to be focusing on the big N word in today's episode, N for networking. I know for some of you, for many of us as doctors, it's a dirty, dirty word that requires one to run away as fast as possible. But the reality is networking is a really, really essential tool or skill to hone, especially if you are looking to grow professionally, move up in your career. And this is what we're all about, like finding and uncovering alternative opportunities that are amazing and right for you. So in order to have this conversation and talk about this really important topic, I have brought back Dr. Johnny Andrews, who is, I always say, part of Medic Footprints Furniture, but also the Chief Medical Officer of Certific and the ultimate networker, I have to say. He totally is. He's always been. And I was like, right, let's talk about networking together. Like he literally knows more people than I do sometimes, I think. But no one ever knows more people than I do because it's me. So welcome back, Johnny. Thanks so much for joining us. We can talk forever. So I thought it's really important to get started on some statistics. We all love stats, right? And before I even start on those statistics, if you like the way the conversation's gone so far, or listen to some other episodes of this and thinking, oh my gosh, this is what I need to listen to as my equivalent MBA to moving and changing careers, then make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. And also make sure you join our mailing list and our publication and our community by going to medicfootprints.org/join our mission. There's even more gold in that. Anyway, right, let's get with the stats. So I'm reading HubSpot, right? Everyone knows HubSpot, the CRM marketing platform. So according to HubSpot, 85% of jobs are filled through networking, 85%. According to LinkedIn, 70% of professionals who are hired had a connection at their company. And more than 80% of professionals consider networking vital to their career success. So, I mean, these are really powerful stats. I mean, what are your thoughts on that in relation to doctors moving careers? I'm over, Johnny.
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on again and the intro. And it's a great topic, actually, networking. And I will speak from anecdotes from myself and career to date, and also pick up on some of these interesting stats. They're mind-blowing, actually, when you think about it. I mean, it strikes me, it's incredibly high, all those statistics. But actually, just reflecting on it for just a split second, I'm not surprised at all. And of course, you know if you're into stats and data, one might argue, well, what's the sample size and what were the where is this data from exactly, and what kind of companies, what type of
LinkedIn,
professionals, what
HubSpot, big
countries.
companies, millions.
But I'm not, I mean, I've seen it from small startups, bootstrapped,
Yeah.
to the bigger, sort of scale ups, and then of course, established companies as well. And I think recruitment is definitely something of an art. I mean, big established companies often do that in house. They have HR teams that do recruitment, and recruitment is a big business for agencies as well. But when you think about it, talent sourcing is, especially in professions that need skilled individuals, it's an art rather than a science. It's not just quantity and data and just a numbers game and just simply putting ads out and putting a bucket tons of money to just find people and attract people. It has to, I think, the client or the customer, which is an employee, also treats it as a bi-directional relationship with their employer. And I think that is why you will find that people will often know somebody in the company. They're
Yeah.
often attracted to a company for different reasons. It might be that it's a big glamorous company that they know all about it. It's in the news, has buckets of money, is doing really cool stuff. But more often than not now, I feel like, especially with clinicians, they're very interested in a bit more behind just the name.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're looking at. Sorry, just to jump in. I think we're looking at networking, and I mean, you've mentioned a lot there. Let's step back. You've mentioned a lot there. So I wanted to actually hone in on like the foundation of what we're talking about, which is networking for doctors in particular. So it's one of those skills that we aren't conscious of. It's something that we do, of course, because we're people and people talk to people, but it's not something that's recognized as a skill or a competency in sense. But especially when you're looking at moving careers outside of the conventional clinical arrangement, which is, especially in the UK, what happens is in medicine, you apply for a job but it's like either a hospital or you're applying for a specialty training program, and actually you can get that job whether you know someone or not, pretty much, right? It's about the whether you pass, whether you get enough points in your interview, right? And it's not about who you know, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself. But the reality is, if you've got doctors who are moving to industry, which is the rest of the world pretty much, if you are looking for a job, it is, there aren't any strict rules onto whether you get that job or not. And it's not always about how many qualifications you have. It's not always about how well you even did in an interview. It is actually about who you know, number one, and whether you fit into the culture. And you're more likely to fit into the culture if it's through who you know, because you've already got someone that they trust that's vouching for you, right? I mean, like, how would you, and I think one of the challenges we've seen doctors face is that they don't like the word networking and what that is associated with, which I think a lot of people think just like having small talk and cold calling or cold messaging. And as doctors, we don't like to bother anyone. We don't want to waste anyone's time, and we're highly, highly apologetic. And it's like actually uncovering job opportunities. How do you best network for that? So so where I'm going with this is, what is networking for? Is it networking to get a job, or is it networking to build relationships, which at some point in the future will uncover the opportunity? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my thoughts are, and if we break it down a little bit, and I feel it's super important to have a bit of a goal in mind. What is it
Mm.
that one is looking to achieve, and then you can optimize for that. So it might be the case that people are looking for a job and they say, okay, fine, networking. I've read online, it says X, Y, and Z, prepare my resume, all of those sorts of things. Yeah, fine. All of those things are important and they do have a place. But you'll often see it. Just in preparation, I did a bit of Googling and seeing what kind of things do you read online? What does ChatGPT say about it, right? And they always mention networking somewhere in there. Point number 6 will be network. What does that mean, right? And is it something that you can do overnight? No, is the answer. That's my opinion.
No,
Or at
you
least,
can't.
at least if
It's
you
about who
try
you
and do
know.
it, it will be incredibly superficial. And it will probably come across as that because you're coming across that you have an agenda or a hidden agenda, which is it will come across,
But most
and
of the
that's
time, you
probably
do
why
have a
there's
hidden agenda, your own
yeah,
agenda,
and you might do,
right?
but I think that's possibly why there is a certain amount of stigma associated with the term networking, because it might be seen to be a little bit of a sleazy, backhanded way of trying to get somewhere or
Or
get
to sell
something from
something.
somewhere. And that is
Mm,
exactly, and I think salespeople are typically quite good at networking because actually, when you look at business, and that's why we're talking about industry in particular, it doesn't matter what I'm being sector agnostic, but a lot of business is done on trust and relationships,
hmm
and that is key to a lot of businesses. Sorry, a lot of business being done. It underpins that. There has to be trust, and there has to be an established relationship, and that allows everything else to flow. So relationship building is super important, and it is something that one should nurture. But like coming back to it, I think it's important to have a bit of a goal in mind. So what is the individual looking for? Is the doctor or clinician looking for a job in the next 3 months, 6 months, now, or just general? And I would argue focus on the long term, not on the short term, even if there are some short term aspirations. So say someone is looking to move into health tech because that's the thing at the moment, maybe, or say they're looking to move into the pharmaceutical industry, or they're looking to go into aesthetics or private medicine or whatever it is. You then have to. I would advise people spending a bit of time doing a little bit of homework. Homework might be possibly does sound again sounds a little bit less attractive, stalking people on LinkedIn, but that I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that is actually part of your due diligence, right? Much in the way that a company, I mean, I do this as part of my job, but will, as part of researching a partner, a client, or someone I might hire, I will do my due diligence and I'll do my reading up, and that will include looking at LinkedIn and other sources. In the same way, you should do that for people that you are looking to start networking with, and who are in roles that you either might want to aspire to one day, or to at least potentially work for that particular company, or just get to know that.
Sure. Well, let me jump in there. When it comes to like the fundamental rules, do you of networking, do you have any particular rules? So I'll tell you about my rules that I'm actually crystallizing more and more as I do this and advise the doctors that we mentor on the Doctors in Industry incubator. Number one rule is be very clear on what your goals are. And that's actually probably the most important rule, in a sense, that you've got to be very clear on your goals and who you are and what you're offering your network. Because what that is probably the one thing that doctors really struggle with, which is the clarity and the focus of who they are for their network or in that ecosystem. Because at the end of the day, if you're not clear, then your network's going to be clear and you're not going to get referred. Then no one's going to remember or understand. And then when an opportunity does come up, they're not going to think of you simply because they don't really know what you're doing or what you do. So I'd say that would be the most important number one thing. And the other one is to be able to look at yourself from the perspective of whoever's going to be buying from you or using your services. Regardless of whether you're going for a job or whether you're an entrepreneur and selling a service, at the end of the day, you are a product. And so I always encourage people to think of like you productizing yourself. Like, what are you offering and what is the value to that company? And so you mentioned earlier about seeing it as a bi-directional arrangement, which it absolutely is. And we don't necessarily see that as doctors, especially in a clinical, like in like say the NHS or in a public sector, whereby you get told what to do, you get told the rules that you'll be working around, with some autonomy, but not really, all the responsibility, but not as much autonomy as we would like, right? And you get told what you'll be paid. And that's what we're used to. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally. And I think to take the bi-directional thing further, and I guess maybe also answer some of the other questions with regards to rules. I mean, I don't have any set rules myself. I don't live by a playbook per se. I think I've
Mm,
probably assimilated a lot of these traits and qualities over the years, and that's probably from doing a lot of different roles. I did have a stint in sales, corporate sales, some years back, before med school, but after my first degree. And I went to sales school there, and that was, face to face, but also telesales. And it was a very interesting time, and I was doing a lot of entrepreneurial stuff myself, trying to start an events business, and that was kind of going door to door and just speaking to people and flyering and all sorts of things. And I think just putting myself out there and speaking and having conversations was where I kind of learned a lot about interactions and how does one come across. And I think taking a step back and also saying, well, how am I perceived is another thing, or how would I like to be perceived. So I guess, again, talking about optimizing for what the goal is. If it's for a job, I want to be memorable. Why do I and what how do I make myself memorable? What do I want to be memorable for? Do I want to be memorable as someone who doesn't really know what I'm doing, or do I want to be more memorable in my kind of elevator pitch as, hi, this is my background and this is what I'm looking to transition to. And that's kind of okay. You've phrased a little bit of where you were and where you're looking to go. Then people might be open to seeing they can help you. But I would immediately jump in here and say, look, it's important to not just go in straight away with an ask. That's not how you build a relationship. And I come back to the point number one about relationships and not just being something that is transactional. This is really more a longer term play, really. I don't like the term play, but you probably get the sentiment. And it's if you read articles or books on this, I think they'll say it in different words, but it's being able to provide value, and being very open and upfront with that. And I think this is something that not too many clinicians understand well enough. If you listen to many sales or marketing gurus online and you scroll through those videos on Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever, you'll see the likes of people like Gary Vee saying, provide, it's all about providing value, and that's how you drive business, and that's how you do this, and content or whatever it might be. And um not to speak badly of that. I think that is actually, if you take that key statement there and say, well, okay, that might be with regards to marketing or selling something, a product or service, but actually think, as you said, Abena, thinking of oneself as a product. Okay, because I want to look for a job, I want to become a key opinion leader, or I might want to speak on stage, or I might want to do X, Y, or Z, and that is why I want to network and build a network and become known for something.
Mm-hmm.
Or you have to be able to provide value. People, if you provide value, you're offering something, and if you have something to offer, people who may be looking for that might become interested in it. And I'm a big believer in providing value up front and for nothing and
Yeah.
no expectation in return. And I feel like if you think about it, with friendships and good relationships, we're talking about healthy relationships here, not getting into the psychology of it,
Yeah.
but take friendships or personal relationships, romantic relationships. Generally, there is a bit of there's a two-sided approach where people are doing something and there's no hidden agenda here. Again, it's just doing something just to be nice, put a
Yeah.
smile on someone's face, or
Yeah.
and I think fundamentally clinicians are actually very good at it. And I think why I have become better at this is not because I've done sales school and stuff 12 years ago. That probably did help in the early days. I think why I've become much better at it and much better recently is because I'm still clinically active. I'm working as a doctor. I've done, in the last 2.5 years, I've done a lot in urgent care. So and I'm seeing patients myself and in a kind of almost like a GP setting. So, and I'm there dealing often with people who are unable to see GPs and they have their frustrations of everything that's going on in the health service at the moment, and the knock-on effect of COVID and all sorts of things. And they come with complaints, not necessarily symptoms also, but social things as well. And I pause and I listen to them, and I really try and say, well, how can I add value to this patient?
Yeah.
Without trying to sound cheesy, but how can I
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
I help them? I know my limitations as well, so I know what I can do, but I also know within the system. I take a step back and go, well, how is the NHS going to serve this? Okay, fine. Is this someone who needs admission, or does it meet a criteria or a guideline? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that might be a binary decision. But if it's no, am I just simply going to say no? You need to go and see your GP. Is someone going to actually accept that and actually feel happy and felt like they were listened to? The answer is no. So it's all about the relationship there as a clinician patient on okay, well, how can I get them to understand or at least explain the situation? And actually, I find just talking, explaining the situation, which might take me longer. So sometimes I do go over on shifts, and things do take longer. But I actually feel that a patient often leaves with a smile on their face. They feel satisfied and they say, "Thank you, doctor. Thank you. The first time you explained this, or my GP didn't, or whoever." And I'm not trying to bash any GPs or anything in particular, if it comes across like that at all. But I'm just using it as an example. So having done that clinically and still doing that clinically,
Mm-hmm.
a couple of evenings a week, that I take those learnings and I apply that in my current job and in business and when I go to events and other things and just brokering introductions that I do between numerous of the people that we know at Bainer, and someone says, well, I see it at an event or you see it at an event and say, hey, I'm interested in X, Y, or Z. I'll just say, have a chat with that person.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
there's no expectation in return there. I'm just
yeah,
trying to provide some value up front because it might deliver some use,
yeah, it's
Um,
quite difficult because obviously, we're all pressed for time. We're very busy people, and a lot of the time, most people that embark on the whole networking thing, there is an agenda. It's nice to be like, oh, I'm just here and I'm just hanging out, and whatever happens happens. But the reality is, especially if you're running a business or if you're looking to get a job, you have to be focused, right? Otherwise, you don't make money, you don't pay your bills. We can see where this is going, but it can be quite challenging balancing the adding value up front and then hoping that you'll get your returns later on. And in some ways, that is it's a bit of an investment. It's a risk. And then you've
mhm.
got to also decide who are you going to help and who you're not going to help, because lots of people will come and ask for help. Lots and lots and lots of people will ask for help from you, or lots of companies will try and get your opinion for free, and actually will probably make money of it later
Yeah.
down the line. I would say, from what you've said, there needs to be a real conscious balance and a line. I think
Mhm.
also because I see a lot of doctors who are thinking that in order to get into industry, they have to sell their services for free to just get their foot in the door, or take a massive pay cut to get their foot in the door, which does not have to be the case. You can if you want to, but does not have to. But there's a narrative in certain circles that it's something you have to do. So I think it's really important to find that balance. But anyway, I wanted to move on to the different styles of networking. So obviously, face to face, like in person, face to face, is a really great way to develop and strengthen relationships, and I can 100% attest to that. But as you know, not everyone likes to or is able to get out of the house, for example. Not everyone is or able to travel, because a lot of us do remote work now, and traveling across the world isn't always possible. And one of the challenges that doctors can face is like, some people say, well, I'm an introvert, I don't want to spend all my time on LinkedIn, I don't want to be like putting myself out there in that way, I find it really uncomfortable, and also that's just not my style. So let's talk about other ways to network that doesn't mean kind of twerking or dancing on LinkedIn, like, or TikTok, I should say, like a lot of doctors have done and still doing. So, I mean, for example, one of the styles of networking really depends on you as an individual. So, if you're someone that likes to, say, for example, you want to get in front of a lot of companies, I find one good way of networking is to do public speaking. As doctors, we've all done public speaking on presentations. That is one way to do it. Or actually go into the company and say, hey, would you like some training? Would you like this? I'll do like a free 30-minute, it doesn't have to be free, but a 30-minute lecture on X topic. And that is a really great way to not only demonstrate your credibility to the company, but also to develop relationships with the staff and the decision makers. And add value up front.
There we go. I was just going to add it. Yep.
So that's just one example. Other people like to do just like one-to-ones, and you can totally get that through just DMing or direct messaging through social media platforms such as LinkedIn. Another thing I've seen is like roundtables, and actually that's something that we're doing in Medic Footprints, where we hold moving to industry roundtables, not more than 5 people or 5 doctors in a room, peer-to-peer support, networking, and sharing their stories. I mean, have you got any other examples of different styles of networking that can be quite effective?
Yeah, totally. I mean, firstly, I'm a big fan of face to face, and I think some people might, and people who maybe know me more recently would say, "Oh, he's quite an extrovert. He loves being in and talking to people." And if you see me at events, I do. I get a real kick and buzz out of it, and I just love speaking to everyone in the room. And I can stay all night, and I often do sometimes stay till the end of events. But I would actually say I am by nature an introvert. I was generally quite quiet, and that's why actually none of this stuff came naturally. So for people there going, well, okay, yeah, it's easy for Johnny to say all these things, and he's extrovert, and therefore, any of these things, whether it's LinkedIn or whatever, he's going to naturally. Well, actually, no. I used to shy away from social stuff when I was younger, and I was, very what's the word? 12 years back, even when I was working in sales, and even I found it a little bit like messaging on LinkedIn and commenting and all these things. Do you have to do it? It seems a bit cheesy. And I think I don't know. I've maybe it's part of getting older as well, and you just stop caring about what other people think really, and just enjoying it. So the first thing to say is find what works, find your rhythm. If you are
Mm-hmm.
much more introverted, if the thought of going to events is not your cup of tea, or the thought of going to events is okay, you want to chat to a few people, and you'd rather be the person in the corner just chatting to one or two people and just get a few deep, meaningful connections that you
Mm-hmm.
then keep in touch with offline or in a hybrid approach, perfect. That's fine. Grow your network slowly. If you want to be someone, if you just love being at events and you go to anything that is in that industry related, so any kind of free drinks event, and if you look at things like Eventbrite, there's loads of these things advertised. There's a lot. I mean, obviously, I know health tech and a little bit of pharma stuff because I follow those and go to lots of those things. Every week or other week there's an event. Many of these are free, and these are great opportunities to meet people. Even if you don't have an agenda, you might go for the speech or the talk or whatever, but the drinks and that networking session afterwards
Can I
is
ask you
perfect.
about events in particular? So I think that's events is like where most people find it extremely daunting. I find
Mhm.
it daunting when I go to events. I have to say, every single one I've been to, even the one I've been to recently, right? Because you're in a room full of people that some of whom you might know from like LinkedIn or personal connections, but most you don't really know them very well. And just getting talking, it's like, well, how do I start? Like, what is small talk like? How do you do it? And how do you approach people? Like, that's another thing. Like, you've locked eyes with someone else in the room, and you're like, should I go and talk to them, or do they know me, or do? And it's really, really, really daunting, even for people who look like they're really comfortable in it. I personally find it quite daunting. But what I do love is like when I start having those conversations, I kind of come into this like, oh my god, you're normal, or oh my god, you're like really inspiring, and I'm learning so much from this. I mean, I guess my question is like, what kind of approach do you take when it's like, oh, you want to go and talk to someone? How do you actually do the approach?
Yeah.
I mean, I'll use an example of, sometimes approaching is like, oh my god, I've seen you on LinkedIn, or I've listened to your podcast, or oh, I've seen you on this. Like, what are you talking? I've seen you on this agenda. What are you talking about? Oh, actually, I know someone that worked with you, or I know someone. Do you know what I mean? Like that. That's one way in, and then it's about not always talking directly about work. I find it's better to just talk about life stuff. Um, because it's about relationships, isn't it? Like, yeah, we can all talk about work, but what about what's really going on in your life and the really important things to you? That's how you make connections. Like,
Hmm.
what do you think?
So sorry, I know we started with wanting to focus on the non face to face stuff really, and I'll get to that in a second because I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
there's
yeah,
a lot of stuff
yeah.
that's non face to face now,
We'll talk about the non face to face stuff in a minute. But yeah,
but events definitely, and yeah, that's been yeah something I invest in quite heavily now, and I think maybe it's also post pandemic is that social connection. But funnily enough, I noticed this shift. I am to a degree still a little bit. Sometimes if it's an event that I know no one that I'm going to, but it might be in a sector that I still have I don't know, some connection to, then I still do feel a little bit apprehensive before, maybe a little bit anxious, getting changed and like, oh, can I really be bothered? And then I always remind myself, well, often I go to these things and I leave feeling very, very happy or
yeah,
satisfied or
yeah,
feel like it was valuable. But often I'm like, it's a waste of time. I've, I managed to I don't know, I had childcare or other things to do. I moved things away. Sometimes I even, rearranged hospital shifts and things just to attend things. I'm like, oh, I could have done other things. I could have just rested, caught up and sleep. There's umpteen other things. You think of all the excuses. I always then remind myself, look, you never know where the journey might take you. And this coming back to a point that you said and I agree with, definitely have a goal. Don't be too kind of wishy-washy and just say, well, anything can happen. But on the flip side, so it's nice to have a little bit of you open to just anything, as in just open to have a discussion for no, um, no, with no agenda, and that includes speaking to people who might not be from that particular sector. You might go to a healthcare related event, or there might be people who are, and you want to get into pharma, or you want to get into something, and you go, okay, that person is from XYZ pharma, and this one, I'm not going to try and deliberately not use any names here, but and then you end up speaking to someone, and someone starts some small talk, but then you see their badge, and they are, I don't know, they are the tech person, or they are something else, and you go, oh, and you immediately go, oh, well, they're not who I wanted to speak to. I want to speak to them. Well, that's going to come across badly. Firstly, invest in any relationship, and I'm a big believer that it doesn't matter who you are. If you're at an event, remember this, for anyone who is there thinking, oh, but events, I still don't like it. Whatever. If you're feeling apprehensive about it, remember that these are curated events where, a select person or profile of person has come there. It's not anyone off the street. So it's not like just walking into a random pub in a random city that you literally know no one. And you're like, I don't even know if it's like the right vibe. I don't know, like that's a hard crowd to crack, and to then strike a chord and say, actually, we can become friends, or we keep in touch, from just going into a random place in a high street. But remember, you're actually in a self-selected group where actually there's probably some commonality that has brought everyone to that event, that conference, that whatever it is. And on that commonality, you have something. I mean, it's in the word commonality. There is something there that you can then pick up on. But then, coming back to something you mentioned, I actually think small talk is highly important. I think as Brits, we talk about the number of times on a Zoom call, and given that Certific is based in Estonia, and I work with Estonian colleagues, and we do a lot of stuff in Europe. They always come. You guys talk about the weather, and how does Johnny make a conversation? An intro on the weather, and then it goes into this and that, and 20 minutes later. But look, that is all rapport building, and actually,
Yeah, we don't like
I
that.
feed off the other person as well. So,
Yeah.
So the other thing is, I mean, there's.
Going to small talk does open doors for a lot, right? But it has to start somewhere. And so, yes,
Let's start
particularly in the
somewhere.
UK, the weather is one of the easiest things to talk about. But just mindful of time, let's just briefly talk about LinkedIn networking. So, I mean, LinkedIn, if you're a doctor and you want to get on LinkedIn, yes, and you haven't used it before, yes, it can be daunting, because most people who you can see who are killing it on LinkedIn, they've been on it for like a long time. I'm talking about decades, long time. But when we're talking about strategy and actually getting ahead and starting to build relationships and connections, what kind of tips would you suggest? So one of the things that we do recommend, again, for doctors, is to start this offline by, again, being clear on your focus, learning how to sell yourself effectively. That's through written as well as verbal, and being very strategic in your approach. Because at the end of the day, you don't need 10,000 followers to actually leverage some really valuable connections that can lead to a job or an opportunity. You just need to have a few high quality connections. And one of the ways of building high quality connections is making sure you have a high quality profile. And I'm not talking about paid LinkedIn subscription, which you can do. It's about really paying attention and treating it like a CV, but it's actually more important than that. So this is the thing. We hardly ever focus on CVs anymore. We focus on your LinkedIn profile, because that is your public profile that is always changing. And it's not just about what you put down as your experience, it's also what you're engaging with. What are you reading? Who are you following? What are you commenting on? And so one of my top tips for if you're listening on LinkedIn, the best way to network on LinkedIn, especially if you don't want to actually be posting yourself, is to comment. And I think commenting is one of those things that kind of really, it's underestimated how valuable commenting can be, and actually how easy it is to connect with people, especially if there aren't that many comments. And so one thing I do, especially if someone's posted and there aren't that many comments or any comments, I comment. Why? Because everyone's so easy to just like tick box and like whatever. But saying something really valuable and of note gets seen by everyone that reads that. Right. So that's one of my biggest ones. And then approaching people and direct messaging them. Again, going back to how to sell yourself and being clear on the focus. And as you said, adding value very early on. And it's one of those things that requires a lot of experimentation. What's your
Mhm.
thoughts on that, Johnny? We've got a few minutes left.
Yeah, totally. So on LinkedIn, and I think that's a primary. I mean, I'm a big lover of LinkedIn. So I've been on LinkedIn since 2010 or 11. So that's quite early, I think. So maybe I'm one of those decade long users. And I had it for sales, and I think we were encouraged very early on to comment, and LinkedIn was seen as, to me, a little bit cheesy compared to Facebook, where people were a little bit more open with their opinions and genuinely engaged with stuff. LinkedIn just seemed like co-workers liking and loving everything. Everything was positive.
Yeah.
This is a bit fake.
It's
Well,
changed
look,
a
I
lot
think
since then,
maybe
isn't it?
it's leveled out a little bit more,
I
but
think it's
it's still
become more like Facebook, but that's another
yeah, I think so
conversation.
too. I think
Yeah.
so too. And that probably the demographic of Facebook users have now moved to LinkedIn, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, first thing to focus on is, look, some of it is just broad mechanics of the algorithms of how any social
Yeah.
media platform work. So it's simply the reason why. So people they're going, well, I don't want to comment on it, or why, what do I do? Like, frankly, it doesn't even matter. I mean, you want to add value, so don't just put a full stop and post it, because if you put a full stop and post it, if you've got someone who you're their only follower, they will see that you've commented on that. So they now know that you're engaged in that thing. So they get drawn to that. That's how the algorithm works, right? But of course, if you just put a full stop, that's rubbish. There's no value there. You need to actually comment on something. And lots of people do it in different ways. And you see some people really hustling. I'm surprised sometimes with the amount of comments, and I log on and this person X, Mr. XYZ or Dr. XYZ is always commenting, and they're always at the top of my feed. How do they have the time to be doing whatever it is that they're
And there's
doing?
people that post like 2-3 times a day, and it's
But
cray.
look, there are ways. If you're a content producer and you want to be the broadcasting your opinion, or putting something out there, then there are ways to do it around a schedule that you're working, and you can use all sorts of apps to pre-prep content and things like that. Personally, I say, look, just be genuine, be yourself. Like, it comes across after a while if you're being cheesy. So genuinely talk about things that you actually know about, or bring in some real examples. Again, try and deliver some value. So if there is a comment as an opinion piece, put your opinion on from your side, and try and use anecdotes that you can. Of course, as clinicians listening here, don't try and make sure you're conscious not to name anything that could potentially indemnify incriminate you in some capacity. So be very kind of broad with what you're doing. Don't I'm a big believer in also trying to sometimes provide alternative opinions, or sometimes slightly contrarian things, not
Don't create
necessarily
an echo
controversial,
chamber.
not for the
Like,
sake of being controversial,
yeah.
but then
Because at the end of
then
the
onto
day, did
your
you know statistically, like most people on LinkedIn, I think at least 70% don't actually create or do anything. They're just more consumers. And if you
consumers,
listen
like
to one of our recent our recent podcasts on LinkedIn with Mohammed Draz, he made the point that actually most the platform, we talk about algorithms, they are rewarding people that actually create over those that just consume even more and more now. So if you're someone that has been sitting back and watching, actually, if you really want to make the most of the platform and your time, do give back by simply commenting and giving feedback. And if you're like reading, or you think, well, that's an interesting conversation, say something of value. And if you're not sure it's of value, you'll know by seeing how much by doing it, and then getting to see whether you got any responses or not. And that's how you learn as to what's really of value or not. And I think, again, I spoke to someone else yesterday, Vanita Ratan, is another podcast. And it's like, actually, a lot of the stuff you just put out, see if it works. If it doesn't work, great, don't do it again. If it does, great, do more of that. And that's
Mhm.
how Vanita, again, previous podcast, she's got to 2.5 million followers on her social media platform. So,
That's
I mean, it's amazing. Anyway, we've totally run out of time, and as usual with Johnny, like, he's got really valuable things to say, and it goes
I
on
can
for a
keep
while.
going. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
but anyway, the call to action for this podcast is, if you are really interested in professionalizing your move to industry, alternative careers, check out medicfootprints.org/industry. This is what we do. We have professionalized it. Think about the skills gap. Think about MBA level moving to industry. This is what your companies want. This is how you get ahead, because most doctors are now looking to leave. So how can you really get one up on them in that sense, but also, most importantly, stand out? So any final words for you, Johnny?
A few final words. So, I mean, with LinkedIn, DMs, actually try and create personal things for those who are, Do virtual coffees. That's something I've started doing. So if you can't leave your house because you've got childcare commitments or whatever, you can't go to all these networking events, virtual coffees with people. There's so many people. I mean, I'm happy to have a virtual coffee with most people. Like it doesn't matter. So if someone wants to, I don't know, just have a chat with me, that's fine. Like just reach out to me
Great.
on LinkedIn.
Find
So,
Johnny
so yeah.
Andrews on LinkedIn. Virtual coffee. He said it here.
So LinkedIn for the win.
He's gonna be having a lot of caffeine in the near future. I
I'll have to buy
predict
some
will
more
be the
decaf.
case. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, Johnny. Thank you so much for coming on again and sharing your misses and your insights. And I'm sure that we'll touch base soon again.
You're welcome. Thank
Take
you
care.
guys. Hope you found it useful.
Bye.